For North Carolina, the entire Tar Heel state is under the winter storm warning. For Virginia, it's just the southern tier. And there is question as to how far north and how far west some of that heavier snow will reach or won't reach. So, it's one of those things where it's a more certain kind of situation for North Carolina at this point. For our area, we still have a lot of confidence that we are going to deal with the coastal storm. And it's funny, while we were seeing the governor and listening to the governor talk about that, I am getting texts and messages from businesses and different church groups, everything. Everybody's hitting. So you get one set of forecast things here. They get the same messaging, but it's coming. I don't think there's any downtimes at all for anybody on the weather team because we're constantly giving the forecast and the forecast updates. What I just sent a close friend that was asking about their business was, here's what we think, but there is still room for change. And again, this was off the record, but I'll put it on the record right now that a little bit of a change in the forecast track still will have significant impacts to our area. I've been in this game, all right, weather predicting since May of 1989. Okay, that's a long time. All right, the forecast stuff has gotten so much better. We've had so many advances and the modeling so much better, but there are still some scenarios where there can be some uncertainty. So I say all of that. I'm going to show you kind of what the thinking is now, how it's evolving, and what I think the impacts are going to be for Southeast Virginia and Northeast North Carolina. We'll start off with the general impacts. You see, we called this weather impact alert early in the week for this weekend because we knew there was going to be this coastal low. We were confident that there was going to be this development. The question's always been, where exactly does it track and how strong is it going to be? We've had a pretty good feel for timing that it was going to come in Saturday and exit Sunday, with most of the worst of the impacts later Saturday into early Sunday. That has not changed, okay? We're looking at accumulating snow across the region, the possibility of tidal flooding with the stronger winds. Those gusts could reach 50 to 60 miles per hour. Take a look at the Euro and the GFS models. And again, I love this because you can see how these two models are really now more stacked on top of each other than at any time previously in the week. You can see the center. That's the red one right there, the center of that. That's the Euro. And the American model is pretty much right underneath it, maybe just a little bit farther to the east or west there. It's kind of hard to see the dead center since the red's over the yellow, but both of those are both centered about the same distance out. You'll notice that it is moving out by Sunday. You see the center there kind of pulling away off to the east-northeast. So that track, the two models are starting to stack up on top of each other. That gives us increased confidence that we are going to see this kind of behaving that way. Now that track's maybe a little farther east of that sweetest of sweet spots for heavy snow. We talked about that and said earlier in the week that, hey, probably the most likely scenario was going to put it between the likely, the snow that produces the most, or the track that produces the most snow, and the one that just kind of gives us a glancing blow. We figured it would be somewhere in between. Here's what the GFS does with the snow that begins again Saturday midday and continues Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. You see that moderate to heavier snow. Winds really start to ramp up there into Saturday night and early Sunday, and the GFS takes the snow away by late morning and early afternoon. Maybe a little bit of mixing down around the Outer Banks on the tail end, but generally a snow event for our area. Now we'll take a look at the Euro. And again, you see the snow developing as we get into, you don't worry about it today, but as we go into Saturday, by late morning and early afternoon, snow begins, and then more intensity later in the afternoon. But again, the Euro's not overwhelming. The Euro actually pulls a little earlier off to the east. By 7 a.m., it's done here, where the GFS kind of kept it around through noon. So the Euro, a little bit quicker with the exit, but still the same general timing. Now, I want to talk to you about the confidence that we have. Precip type, high confidence. Okay, it's going to be cold enough for mostly snow, maybe a little bit of mixing down around the Outer Banks, but that we're pretty confident on. Storm timing, Saturday into Sunday, very confident. We've seen the models holding true to that all week. Where I lack confidence is in the final projections of snow totals. That's why we've started putting out our forecast, but there is some question. Now, if you want to see what we are wrestling with here, or wrestling with, if we want to get real with this, take a look at the snow potential. 3 different models, the NAM, the GFS, and the Euro. And note that sharp cut on the farthest west extent of the snow. You get to Richmond, Tappahannock, very little projected there with the NAM, but the NAM's cranking out maybe 9 inches for Norfolk. You can see 10, 11 inches, southern parts of Chesapeake and Virginia Beach, and heavier amounts down into North Carolina. The NAM has been the beefiest of those models in terms of the widespread heavier snow for Hampton roads. The GFS has 5 to 6 inches for Norfolk and some slightly higher amounts down to the south of that, about 6.5, 6 to 7 for Virginia Beach. And the Euro has heavier amounts a little farther south into North Carolina, 16 inches for Ahoskie is what the Euro's projecting. But you'll notice lighter amounts again to the north, and around Norfolk only about 4.2 inches. Now, you're going, okay, all those project snow, we feel pretty good. Take a look at the graph model, and this is a model that we use a lot, and it does a great job with a lot of systems, but sometimes, and it hasn't produced quite as well with some of the winter systems, this graph model keeps the heavier snow down to the south and brings that cut line closer to Norfolk. So, you've been hearing these numbers all week. Oh, we could see 4 to 6 inches, maybe 7 or 8 inches, and you wind up with 1.3. People are going to say, what?
Yeah.
Oh, you guys don't know what you're doing. Okay, the reality is we have 5 models that I can point to that say, yeah, it's going to be worse, and you have one that's an outlier. Yesterday, this model had a half an inch or so, half an inch to an inch for Hampton roads. Then yesterday, during the afternoon, this same model went crazy with amounts of snow. Now it's back to this. So you tell me, Eugene, which one do you trust?
I trust you.
There we go. You're a good man. You're a good man. I just made my
How about
map
that?
go
I trust you,
here.
Craig.
Hang on a second. Let's get to our team's outlook, okay? And this is the map. And take this one full again, Sarah, so we can talk about what this says. All right. Tim put this together. I've only tweaked it a very little bit this morning. I really didn't have to adjust it much at all. Best chances for snow. And I will say with those models that were coming around 4 to 5 inches, I believe most of those models were basing that on more closely like a 1 to 10 liquid to snow ratio. And I think we're going to be closer to 1 to 15 with this, with the drier air, maybe even a little bit more. That's why we're looking, I think the National Weather Service now has 7 inches projected for Norfolk at last peak. And that's a really good number, I think, for our area. It may be less, you could say 4 to 6, but with that fluffier, lighter snow, it could add up to 7. Whatever falls, it's falling onto frozen surfaces, so it's going to add up quickly. The heavier amounts, maybe 8 or 9 inches. Virginia Beach, you get down into North Carolina, some areas 10, 11, maybe even 12 inches in some areas. Not everybody, but some areas down that way. That's why we've got that broad range, 8 to 12 inches for the areas shaded in purple, southern Virginia Beach, southeastern Chesapeake, and into North Carolina. There may be some areas that don't get that much, okay, but that's the potential. That 4 to 6, maybe 4 to 8 inch total in pink extends across the metro area. Could be closer to 4, could be a little closer to 6, 7, or even 8 inches. And then it gets lighter as you get up on the peninsula and up towards Richmond. So that's the general thinking. Now, some other things to consider. It's going to be very windy. And if you get the visibilities way down thanks to blowing snow, which is a possibility if we get gusts 45 to 50 or even 60 miles an hour down around the Outer Banks, that would create potential blizzard conditions. There are still some wild cards. The dry air that's in place, will that diminish some of the snow and moisture that comes in? If that dry air prohibits it from coming in, may knock down those totals. If the track is farther to the east, may knock down those totals. If it comes west, you could imagine shifting that 8 to 12 inch area farther west. If that low tracks closer to the coast, it's still one of those moving targets that we are trying to pin down. And again, the intensity. So all of this makes for really tricky forecasting. I know you're like, cry me a river. Okay, I get it. But this isn't just as easy as saying, okay, it's going to snow, everybody's going to get this or that. It's a wild one, I'll say that. Now, extreme cold watch. We talked about this earlier. Wind chills 0 to 5 below, take a look at our wind chill forecast here. And again, Sarah, a great graphic to take full. You're going to notice as we look up towards Williamsburg, Saturday morning could be below 0, 8 around Virginia Beach, 4 in Suffolk, maybe below 0 up in Accomack. That's Saturday. That extreme cold watch is for Sunday. So as we go forward Sunday, look at these wind chills Sunday morning. Even Saturday night around 9 o'clock or so, we're going to see single-digit wind chills widespread as the winds intensify. And Sunday morning, when I'm in, are you coming in over the weekend?
I am.
You are? I love it.
I'll be here.
We can huddle up.
The band will be together again.
We're going to see wind chills that are going to be sub-zero. Expected at this point, if those winds kick up the way they're expected to, Edenton, Elizabeth City, Cora Peak, Ahoskie, Suffolk, Chesapeake, Norfolk, Williamsburg, Gloucester, Accomack, potentially, if the models are correct, could see below 0 wind chills. That's why we have the extreme cold watch, and it will be an extreme cold warning if we see this come to fruition. So as you can see, guys, we have a lot of impacts that we expect. Snow, we're not as worried about ice and sleet because this is really going to be a snow event, or it won't be. And what I mean by that is most areas, it's cold enough for snow, so you're either going to get a lot of it for those areas that get it, or if you're on the other side of that cutoff line, maybe you don't see as much, but it's going to be windy and cold. Gusty winds, a significant impact, 50 miles or greater wind gusts potentially at the coast. That's going to create blowing and drifting snow. And it's also going to drive the tide levels moderate to major. Now, we talked with Charisse from Dominion during the weather desk. Mm-hmm. And I was asking her, when do you start to see the power issues? What's your threshold? She said, 30, 35 miles per hour, those gusts, when we start to see it. You're looking at gusts up around 50 to 60. So, again, keep the cell phones charged. Make sure you've got the mobile app. Have everything ready to go. Not saying you're going to lose power necessarily, but once we get these potential wind gusts realized, you could have issues.
And on that point, if you do lose power, some things to remember for Dominion. They say go ahead and let them know as soon as possible. You can do that on their app. If you do have access online, you can do that by going to Dominion Energy's website. But as soon as you can let them know that you have an outage, they can try to tend to that. The other thing is if there's a down power line or anything of that nature. I know a lot of us think that we're Superman and Superwoman, and we could try to, at least figure something out. Don't even get close to it. Just get on the phone, call as immediately as possible, because you don't know if that thing is powered at that point, and it could cause a lot of issues. Stay as far away as you can. I just wanted to interject with that because every time we talk about down power lines, we need to make sure we communicate how people can stay safe.
And before I get into the tidal flooding, I want to piggyback on what you're saying, Eugene, because one of the other things that Charisse had really stressed was there may be some intermittent power outages where you lose it, and maybe you report it, comes back on, then those winds are blowing, the lines could go back out. Every time it goes out, take time to report it. Don't assume your neighbor is, because it may be a very localized outage. They have to know so they can get a response figured out to your power issues. So it may be one of those things where you have to report it a few times. And then the other thing, Eugene, and I don't want to sound preachy here, but we got to do it, all right? If you lose power and you lose heat, be very, very careful about how you find alternative ways to stay warm. We've got dangerous cold here. You guys know that. But with this, invariably, I'll say, it seems like it happens every single year. We have some tragic news story after these cold snaps of somebody that improperly used a space heater too close to drapes, or used the stove or an oven to try to heat the kitchen and caught a fire, or used candles or whatever and got into trouble that way. I really can't stress it enough. Please, please, please be extra cautious and, just think about what you're doing and make sure that you're tending very, very carefully whatever's going on, because we always have those stories where people, it's survival. You need to try to stay warm. Some people, start their cars and maybe they don't have good ventilation or whatever. There can be issues. You just need to be very smart and be extra, extra cautious when trying to stay warm through the weekend if you do lose power. All right, we got to talk about the tides. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
you get a steady northeast wind and you get those winds blowing in excess of 50 miles an hour, you're going to have tidal issues. Coastal flooding is anticipated Sunday morning. There's already a coastal flood watch, and that includes Northampton as well as Norfolk, Portsmouth, Chesapeake, and Virginia Beach, as well as the Outer Banks, okay? They're going to have flooding issues with the forecast strong winds. Now, again, if the low's farther offshore or it doesn't intensify, which at this point, everything's calling for this thing to ramp up. So I think we're going to see it cranking up. How close it is to the coast may impact the extent of the tidal flooding, but the chances are there. So we'll take a look at our flood gauges for Sewell's Point right now. The latest guidance suggesting moderate tidal flooding, 5.5 feet for that highest tide coming Sunday morning. All right. I also noticed around the Little Creek Inlet and the East Beach Marina, anticipating about 5.6 feet there as well. That would be moderate tidal flooding. As we take a look at the Lynn Haven Inlet, the gauge there expected to reach a level of about 5.9 feet that coming Sunday morning with the high tide. That could produce major tidal flooding. So folks there susceptible to your tidal issues around the Lynn Haven Inlet and those areas feeding off the Lynn Haven, know that you could have major tidal flooding there. And then I do want to take you down to the Duck Pier and the tides at Duck, expecting major tidal flooding as well Sunday morning. The high tide there at 7 o'clock.
Craig, this might just be my own ignorance, but I can't remember since I've been here, and maybe it's also my memory, a moment in which we've been talking about snow, cold temperatures, and tidal flooding.
Yeah.
Like together, that's not something I recall since I've been here.
So it's something that a lot of times, we're able to separate. You think more about the tidal flooding with like tropical storms and hurricanes and that, which is obviously summer and sometimes into the fall. I will say, Eugene, that with nor'easters, and that's essentially what this is, we've had some of our worst flooding events, tidal flooding events on record in Norfolk have been due to nor'easters. If those of you that have been around long enough to remember back to the late 90s and the early aughts, we had at one time we had twin nor'easters that came on the heels of one after the other. Incredible amounts of tidal, levels. And it wasn't as bad as Isabel, which set the gauge, at Hampton Road, Sewell's Point, or the 33 storm. There have been some massive ones, the Labor Day storm, that have been, the kind of the bar setting flood events, but those nor'easters absolutely can and do produce the nasty weather. So just want to give you guys a heads up. Temperatures staying really cold through the weekend. We're going to get you through. We've got extra staffing on Albion tomorrow and again on Sunday. Do you have a question?
I do. I saw you had the Duck tides up for the Outer Banks. Do you think, because I know that they've had issues there with homes collapsing for years now, do you think that this is going to be a problem for that area?
So anytime you have major tidal flooding along the Outer Banks, I think you have to be very mindful of it. I'm glad you bring that up. Sarah, not only does she produce here Live Impact News, but she also does the weather desk, which is amazing that she helps bring together interviews. And we were talking to Tim Haas with NCDOT. They were concerned about overwash on NC-12. So that's another thing with these tides. I don't know, and again, I can't speak to what I don't know how many homes are kind of precariously hanging in by a thread right now. But with the tide levels expected and the strong coastal low, I would imagine beach erosion will be a significant issue Saturday night into Sunday. Will it be enough to create, another collapse? I don't know the state of the houses down there specifically, but I can tell you that NCDOT is anticipating right now. We're absolutely planning on overwash on NC-12. And again, that beach erosion, a big concern. And so that's a great question.
And on top, kind of speaking to that, this may be a weird question too. With that overwash expected on NC-12 and with the cold temperatures, could that stretch also, in this case, be dealing with some ice that's on
it's
there?
logical. Very logical question.
Put one and one together.
I will tell you, because that's where my mind went as soon as he said overwash. I was like, is that going to create some glazed surfaces? It's possible. The temperatures down there are really cold. I will say with that ocean water being a little warmer, and that kind of moderates the air temperature right at the beach down along the Outer Banks. And again, there's some other things that kind of come into play. So I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's absolutely this or that. But that's where my mind went as well, Eugene. So I think that's a reasonable question to think. And we've also had this. Gosh, there's so many things that, I just want to talk about out there. We have had at times, anytime we've had small craft advisories or the stronger winds picking up on the bay, and I can show you right now, I've got the satellite images up and the radar. We're in good shape right now. So when we talk about what's coming in, now's the time. If you need to do any preparations around your house, now's the time to do it. Despite it being so cold out there, at least it's still dry. As we get into this, we've got good conditions right now, but with small craft advisories, going up, and then gale or storm warnings later on. It's going to get worse. The winds will pick up later tonight, and then tomorrow, storm warnings and storm watches, which will flip over to warnings, are anticipated. You're going to get freezing spray coming off, where you have waves crashing into bulkheads and stuff. You're going to find freezing spray and some of that. We've already seen that with our conditions over the past several days. So this is all very real, the opportunities for this. Highs today, upper 20s, low 30s for some areas down to the south. Off to the north, we're going to find mid-20s for the eastern shore, mid to upper 20s for the middle peninsula and the peninsula, and then down across, up, it tried to jump over it. It did. It went straight to the 7-day. Would you believe that? For North Carolina today, mid-30s down that way. Overnight tonight, lows down around 21. We'll see teens inland, and then 26 for a high tomorrow at Norfolk, 18 for Sunday morning. And with that, that 18, keep in mind the wind chills. The winds are going to be so strong Saturday night into Sunday that we anticipate wind chills to be below zero for some locations. So that 18, that's at the airport. We're going to find some areas even colder, snow likely, blowing snow, drifting snow, and then the temperatures try to recover a little bit by the middle of next week. What a stretch.
What a stretch indeed. And a little, just like I said, I can't remember a time where we've had all these different elements, especially this time of year with the cold and it's certainly will make for an interesting weather event.
Yeah, it is. And I will tell you, our weather team, and if we can speak to programming just for a minute, of course, this Live Impact News is such a tremendous vehicle to get information out. We're glad that you're watching right now and streaming this. But we're going to have extended weather coverage streaming throughout the weekend, later today and tonight. 13 News Now Plus, where you stream that, you are going to have so much content as this comes in. We're going to be relying on users to take pictures of the snow in their areas, helping us tell the story. We love it when you submit your pictures and videos of what's happening in your area. We're going to have a wide range. Some folks farther north and west may not see much. Other areas may see a lot. You factor in the winds, the drifting and blowing snow, reduced visibilities, bitter cold temperatures. There's a lot going on potentially this weekend, and we're going to be here with team coverage throughout the weekend. I'll be working Saturday and Sunday morning, so no weekend for me this weekend with Taylor Stephenson as we cover all this ahead of this on Saturday, and then during the event on Sunday. So a lot going on. And I know that we've got Tim and Evan in with Hunter tomorrow night during the worst of that storm Saturday night and into Sunday to hand it off to me and Taylor. Look at the team there. It's incredible.
The team there. Listen, everybody's going to be in to support and help. Make sure we have you fully covered here with this weather, impact alert that we're going to have here in the area. And Craig, just great job, man, breaking down all of that information. And one thing I want to point out before we go out the break, Craig, it was something you said at the early portion that people were texting you personally asking for, what they can possibly expect this weekend. I don't want to just glance over that because that is the power of your local team of meteorologists. These are people who aren't just telling you something that, from some far off land. They're in it with you. You are living this with them. These are people you shop with. These are people who have their kids in schools here. Their families are here. They are along for the ride with you as well. So I just wanted to bring that up, Craig, because that was the power of that you have people who can literally text you.
I appreciate that, Gene. And I will say this, too, at 13 News Now, we do not overhype these storms. We don't do it. As a weather team, we try to stay grounded in all of this. So we're not just picking crazy numbers to throw out. We're using the best technology that's available, the best modeling that we have. They're not always 100%, that's for sure. If this pivots, our job is to call and catch that pivot as quickly as possible and let folks know that. Again, we're going to be spending time away from our spouses, and there's going to be things going on through this weekend that we're working to keep folks informed. So we hope everybody appreciates the coverage. Certainly, some folks are going to be delighted with whatever we get, and others may be a little disappointed ultimately. But the bottom line is we need to be prepared to address these threats, and we've got a plan in place to do just that.
All right, Craig, we appreciate you.